For the first time ever, violent acts of religious persecution are being tracked through a brand new database from Global Christian Relief. Since 2022, the group has tracked over 6,000 incidents around the globe, including killings, arrests, and forced marriages, to help spread awareness of the ongoing persecution. President of Global Christian Relief, David Curry, joins us now. David, thanks for joining us today. Tell us what you hope to accomplish with this database.
Well, what the database is meant to do is to draw attention to the fact that religious discrimination, violent attacks against people of faith is growing. It's been growing remarkably for the last 10 years. And we know the problem is even worse than the data shows us, because what we've done is we've taken all of the public sources that we could possibly find. We're working with the International Institute for Religious Freedom, great researchers, and then we're documenting irrefutable proof about forced marriages, attacks on churches, people who have been arrested simply for their faith. And so it's going to be a baseline number. This is a growing human rights problem. It's probably the biggest one because it revolves around these ideas. What are you able to believe and practice in your own country freely? And believe it or not, here in America, we have a lot of freedoms. Many places, they don't have the freedom to make up their own mind about their faith.
Yeah, well, a lot of Christians are feeling persecuted and silenced in America as well, but certainly in other countries, to much more violent methods to persecute them. Which religion is the most persecuted based on the available data?
Christians are the most persecuted minority faith, and that sounds strange for some people who know that America probably would consider itself the majority of Christians as far as numbers of people. But you're talking about 100 million believers in Christ in China who face oppression, monitoring. Yes. Their religious practices are scored in their social system as a negative. You also have 65 to 70 million Christians in India who are being discriminated against greatly. So there are a lot of places where there are a large number of people. But this index doesn't just touch on Christian persecution. Right. It's also attacks against Jews, people of other faiths. This rise of anti-Semitism is tracked here.
David, you were just in Nigeria. Tell us what you saw and what's it like to be a Christian in Nigeria right now?
Well, it's an incredibly brutal environment in the north of Nigeria, and this is a democratic government. We have supported them with hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet they do not protect their Christian minorities in the north of this country. There are over 7,300 people who were killed for their faith in the reporting period of this index. This is important for the whole world because Nigeria is the center of what's going on in Africa. And if in countries such as Nigeria, with all its wealth, all its wonderful culture, loses control of half of its country, that means Niger, Chad, Cameroon, all of these areas, Burkina Faso, you could lose a whole swath. This is not unlike what happened prior to ISIS taking over a large chunk of Iraq and Syria. Right. They lose control of the elements of security, and then the extremists take over, and there are major implications for safety for everyone.
I mean, there was massacre over Christmas, but the persecution and the violence continues. The jihadists against the Christians, many of them just poor farmers. It's just heartbreaking in Nigeria.